Netter, and this is California Free Radio, blasting out on social media all over the land, mainly California, but wherever you are, take a look at Netter Mike, at TextFighter.com, on the Magical X, on our Facebook groups, Rebuild California, and Mike Netter, and on LinkedIn, at Mike Netter. Yes, I'm using my real name, as I say every week, and let's not forget our YouTube channel, Outraged. And if what we have to tell you tonight and every night doesn't tick you off, I don't know what to say. I really wanted to come on tonight with a deck of cards, but unfortunately I couldn't find them. For 3-card Monte, 2 of them being jokers, of course, because that's all in a standard deck, because that's how Gavin Newsom seems to be rolling in the press lately. Isn't it amazing to everybody how he's hubba-da-hubba on the budget and back and forth what's wrong? On my Netter News edition coming out this Friday tomorrow, if you don't subscribe, you need to. If you're worried about money, don't. It's free, and I do watch you subscribes, so make sure that you do. We're talking a lot about the budget and a lot of the edicts that Gavin Newsom is putting out as he points fingers. But here's the reality of it. California, like the county of Los Angeles, like many counties up and down, and the city of Los Angeles are going broke. And it is no one's government that we have in California. A quick edification for everybody, and we're going to go deep tonight with a very special guest on what's going on, this and nationwide, and the press. But what the press doesn't really make clear, that when they talk about, oh my God, look what they're doing on Medicare to the poor people. Medicare for illegal aliens, I'll say it, Biden did, why not? I can be politically incorrect, is paid for in California by the citizens of California, not by the federal government. And so that 6.5 billion tab, oops, missed it by that much, Gavin, is picked up by the people of California. And even Gavin Newsom is having a backtrack on that right now, but he's giving tons and tons of hyperbole why. Not to mention the fact, as he told everybody, homeless people, you can only reside in one spot for 3 days per my edict now, so the counties and cities are moving them around, but still can't account for the $24 billion with the that he has spent in the last 3 years, because no one knows where it goes. A little bit underreported by the press, but hey, why do they care? It's not their money except for a little bit of it that we call taxes. There is things going on in the California legislature and on the national scene that are so misreported, that are so underreported, that are frankly so appalling, and that we have to get ready starting today for the 2026 cycle. And that's why we're incredibly delighted to have a special guest tonight. But before I introduce our special guest, I'm going to ask Scott to roll a clip, and gents, for you to come in with a couple comments.
Well, we'll let it roll.
The work of Mr. Tapper and also the decline of President Biden.
Oh, yeah, it was really rich to hear Tapper say, well, the White House was just lying to everybody. They lied to the press. They lied to even his cabinet. They lied even to them. Oh, gee whiz, I wonder if there were only some kind of job that you could get where you are tasked with investigating things to find out the true story about what's going on behind the scene. I don't know if Jake knew anybody like that, but perhaps he might have wanted to look at a journalist to find out what was going on. I'm running out of words to describe this. I'm absolutely astonished at how stupid he thinks we are. I knew that Joe Biden was declining, and I'm a housewife. I live in Orange County. You know what I mean? I didn't have to really do a lot of research to find out what Joe Biden's mental capacity was. Jake Tapper sat across from him. All these people sat across from him. Yeah. Not only that, they all live and work on the Hill. What happens at 3 p.m. on the Hill? You go out to the bars, you're with the staffers, you're with the assistants, and they talk.
Talking about
Everybody knew this is a lie.
And Brittany,
Hey.
So, as you can see, for everybody out there, one of those commentators was Kira Davis. And let's introduce her now. Dan, bring in Kira Davis. Kira, how are you doing? I want to start off by saying I hope you're not at a loss for words tonight, because that would make the show rather awkward.
Hi,
But
Mike. It's good to be here. Thanks for
thank you.
the
So great to have you. You and I have known
invitation.
each other now for, I think, 3 or 4 years. You met me during the recall, like I met most of these people.
Yeah, but
Let's
you're
start-
legend. You're already legend, though. I knew of Mike Netter way before I ever met Mike Netter. You're a legend.
Well, so did a lot of law enforcement, Kira, but we shouldn't cover that on the air. Let's talk a little bit. Introduce yourself a little bit to our studio audience. We welcome to have the time, and I tell them what you do. Also, I'm going to go ahead and blow some of your thunder. Sorry, because I love the name of your podcast. Do you listen to yourself? If I have it correctly, I probably butchered the words a little bit because I
No,
don't
yeah.
think politicians do. But go ahead and tell people what you do. I'll ask you a few times and where they can find you.
It's called Just Listen to Yourself, but I actually love your name for it. And I'm thinking maybe it would be a good companion podcast, maybe like a little bite-sized to just listen to yourself. Do you listen to yourself? But either way, the point is made. Yes, the podcast is Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis, and you can find that wherever you find podcasts. I'm also an author. I wrote a book couple years ago called Drawing Lines, Why Conservatives Must Begin to Battle Fiercely in the Arena of Idea, endorsed by my good friend, Dan Bongino, on the cover. Very honored. And now the Deputy Director of the FBI. How cool is that? That the Deputy Director of the FBI endorsed my book, although he wasn't at the time. I live in Orange County, California, in South Orange County with my husband and, 2 kids that are kind of on the way out. I'm about to be an empty nester. And yeah, I ran for school board a couple of years ago here in Orange County. I lost that race, took some time to recover, and we're heading into 2026. It's going to be a really contentious year, so I'm back in the game.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We talk all the time about, and I think part of the problem Republicans, and Scott ran for state assembly too, and I want Scott and Kurt to intro some questions here, if you will. It's fascinating because I think part of the problem with Republicans, one of the reasons we do this podcast, where, by the way, we could see your comments along the side, and if we think it's good, we'll talk about it. So make them good comments. Call in with a take, as they say. But the trouble, I think, is that the Democrats are on this all year long, and I don't think they listen to themselves. And the Republicans, although we're learning, we're like in political rehab, tend to like get on it during an election cycle, and then we wonder why no one's heard of us. Scott, interject something on this, because you've been in politics. I think you met Ben Franklin originally.
Yeah, right. No, I think you're the one that's pals. And I thought it was Thomas Jefferson, actually.
Actually,
Kira,
Ben and I set up the post office. I'm most proud of that, but I was his intern.
Kira, you ran for school board. Was it Capo Valley?
Yeah, Capistrano Unified, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a contentious district down there.
Oh, boy. Yep.
And it's one of the largest school districts in the state outside of
The
LA.
second largest. Yes, you're right.
So it's a challenge out there, and the liberals have taken it over, just like they've taken over the whole state. And here it is in conservative Southern Orange County.
Yeah.
What were the main issues that you had when you ran?
Well, this was the heat of COVID. It was actually a special election. My school board representative snuck away in the middle of the night, resigned her position after she voted to keep the schools closed. And so that was enough. She left. I immediately jumped in. I was suffering with 2 kids of my own at the time. So my issues were COVID, really COVID related, opening schools, catching up learning. And then, of course, at that time, now it's the trans issue, but at that time we really were fighting CRT and DEI in the school. So I was running against those things. And I got a lot of attention. I have a national presence. So I was able to take my campaign national, but it wasn't the right time for that. And locally, the unions they did not want to have a Fox News guest on the school board, so they threw everything against me. And it got pretty vicious. I lost in the never ending count and the ballot dumps that never once broke for me. And there's definitely shenanigans. I'm still rolling around a lawsuit in my head, to be honest.
Did you actually win on election night? You were ahead on election
No,
night?
I was never ahead, but I was close. It was definitely winnable. And in fact, when I had my GOP analyst reps, I had a mentor in the party texting me going, "You've won this. I'm looking at the trends, the opening or election day trends. You're definitely going to win on the ballot dumps." But every ballot dump broke for my opponent,
And,
who had been school board shopping. The union moved him in, bought him a house as soon as I announced.
and that was in 2020, I take it?
That was 2022. So the seat was back up this year. I did not run again, but a conservative slate ran, and we actually did flip the board. So it's a conservative
Yeah.
board now.
I mean, that's one of the bright spots. So even in California, there is a sign of optimism that we can have.
Mhm.
How would you? I know when I ran for assembly here last November, it was an uphill battle,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and of course the ballot fraud is still rampant. Right after the election, after election night, I mean, what happens? I'm going to be blunt. After they figure out how many votes they need to pick up, they manufacture those votes, drop them in the mail. They eventually get counted, and they win.
Yeah.
And we saw Michelle Steele lose her seat in Congress here in Orange County by 300 votes. We saw a couple of other close races. We were fortunate with Capitol Valley. We were able to come in there and flip that board. So, are you an optimist about California?
Yeah, I really am, actually. I have never felt more optimistic since I became a Californian 16 years ago. And I'll tell you why. After 2022, I was pretty devastated. I really was not sure about the prospects for the state. But who could have predicted how horribly things would go wrong in the next 2 years? And then, of course, the fires in LA. I wrote a piece on my Substack, and your viewers can go to my Substack, justkiradavis.substack.com, or just look me up on Substack. I wrote a piece during the fires called "Burning Away: The Last of Our Fog," and it was a piece where I said, I think this is it. This is the last of the haze for the California voters burning away. Everybody's been burned by this. Now, the ballot issue, that's the big issue. That's going to be a big issue. We've got some great gubernatorial candidates who are going to be doing well with name recognition, but the ballots are going to be the issue. I believe we can win if the state party, if the GOP wants to get very serious about it and do sort of replicate their Trump victory, which is starting now, today, stationing lawyers, bringing lawsuits, training your volunteer force to sit at the ballot. Matter of fact, I believe the GOP should have a person. We should have private security at every ballot box throughout the state. An incredible task that would require huge coordination and a lot of money. But I think it's sort of balls to the wall time, if you ask me.
Kurt, weigh in on that a little bit. Kurt's an attorney, by the way, amongst 14 other things that he does. Weigh in on that. I mean, how would you approach that, having an attorney, a legal beagle?
Kurt, you were around when Kurt Pringle got in trouble for having guards at polling places in Orange County. So how would you do it?
That was 30 years ago now. The problem is that it is, all of you have stated, that they bring in late ballots to cheat. So the way to stop it is, and I think they should do this in the reconciliation bill, so it's national, because these are national elections where there's members of Congress and the Senate who are elected. Paper ballots, watermarks, same-day voting, precinct voting like the good old days, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and all polling places should be videotaped.
So you
all polling.
So
what happened in Detroit, where they had a pipe break, wink, wink. They
Isn't that
kicked
funny
everybody
how that
out, and
happened?
then they brought the they brought the fake ballots in. And then the other thing is harsh penalties for voter fraud. When they find these people, and they have been arresting a few of them, Just lock them up and throw away the key.
Well, Newsom calls them mortally challenged because you can't arrest the dead, which seems to be another problem with the voter rolls. Kerr, I want to go back to the press speaking of this, right? Because that's what your Fox segment was on. And you asked the question, how stupid do they think the public is? Well, apparently they think we're pretty stupid. And let me give you an example of things that I noticed, and I'd like you to weigh in a little bit if you don't mind, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, because of what I do, and I'm ashamed to admit this, I have to watch the evening news sometimes, okay? It's just, all right, it's like watching Leave It to Beaver in black and white from the old days. And it was funny because I watched a brief segment tonight. And what struck me is, as we say in religion, the sin of omission. Because they talk about, for example, well, here's Donald Trump, and he's, in Saudi Arabia, where he has many business interests. And I go, gee, that's funny. You never mentioned when Biden was giving money to Ukraine that his son served on the board there, getting millions of dollars. But hey, why bring that up? So what are some of the things about California that you think the press doesn't bring up? I have a list, but I'm interested in hearing yours. That may be a challenging question, but
That's
I find
a good
it
question.
fascinating. Because again, the public really, many of them turn on their TV, hey, right? They can't find the remote control to get the news off, so they watch the first 8 minutes, because if you're like me, you never know where it is. And by the time you find it and switch, either turn it off or switch to baseball, you've heard something, but it's what you don't hear. So I want to kind of present you with that a little bit, because before I let you answer, is even on Fox, when we're on these networks, they guide us with what they want to talk about. And one of the things we do, we call it California Free Radio. What do you think are some of the issues that we're not talking about that should be talked about?
Wait a minute. Are you saying that Newsom is mentally challenged and like Biden? And we don't know it.
I think I do not want to insult any mentally challenged people out there. I think Newsom is in a class of his own. Biden just grew old. Newsom was born stupid. But let's.
Okay.
And I'll start off here with a little conversation lubrication, if you will. I think one of the things that the press isn't talking about, for example, is the fact that Newsom is draining the state's life savings in terms of what we call the
rainy day fund.
Thank you, Scott. Back to the white light. The rainy day fund. We have to have a rainy day fund by law. A couple of years ago, we had $90 billion on it, and Newsom and the Democrats spent it on all these ongoing programs. And now he's draining the rainy day fund again this year, and we will have to recharge it by law at some point. That's an example of something that's not really being talked about as Newsom skedaddles out the door marked exit in 2026 as we glide into the conversation. These are the kinds of things I'm going to ask you, what do you think we're not talking about in California?
I don't feel we talk enough about just how corrupt Sacramento is. I don't think we sort of just take it for granted, all of us, even those of us on the right who know and experience it. And, it's like our left-wing friends, like you say, a lot of them, they're not paying attention. They sort of check that box, or at least in the past, and move on. They don't know. They might say, yeah, all politicians are corrupt, but they don't know the depth of it. We have some people out there. I mean, we've got some radio hosts out there. We've got you guys. I know Soledad is in Venice Beach. Has been talking about the corruption there forever. But I do wish that, because it's one thing to have, what's a story? I'm putting my media hat on now. What's a story in state? What's a story nationally? Those are two different things.
Right.
Who are you asking to care? If you're asking Californians to care, maybe that's a different type of story. Maybe we do want to talk more about, insurance or, the water or the rainy day fund and educate people. But nationally, that's not going to mean much, to a national audience that can only distill ideas about California into blue versus red, left versus right. So, moving into 2026, we do have to be savvy about that messaging. But if I was going to message to Californians, The thing I don't think that Californians understand is how deeply corrupt Sacramento is. They have no idea how things are working there. And if there was some kind of Venn diagram or some kind of chart that someone smarter than me could come up with to see, here's how these committees get appointed. Here's the decisions they're making that affected that thing that you went to complain to your school about last week. This is a result of that happening all the way up here. You never think, you just pulled the lever. So I wish there was a way to talk about that in more clear terms. And part of the genius of evil, so to speak, is that
Hold on, I think
there's
Scott's
so
having a
much going
stroke.
on. You can't talk about
Scott, go
it.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, help our audience understand. Give us maybe an example that someone could take home, so to speak, of how Sacramento's corrupt. I know you got all these interrelationships, and overall it works like a big corrupt body. But give us one example.
Well, it's a one great example is this made national news. The bill that the sex trafficking bill that came up this past week. So it's a Democrat bill in committee, which means it's got to go through the committee process. This is for people who might not be familiar. Go through the committee process. They make amendments, then they bring it back. They vote on it, and then they take it out of committee and give it to the General Assembly. Or this was a Senate bill. Well, this bill was to make penalties harsher for sex traffickers who want to pimp out children. But Democrats couldn't pass their own bill because they wanted to exclude 16 and 17-year-olds from that bill. They felt like that was too much for some reason. It
We
was
talked
very
about that in depth in our show last week.
well. Here's what
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
tell us the corrupt side.
Well, here's what they did. Senator Scott Wiener, who I
I'm
think
sorry,
is,
we don't allow cussing on our show. We have a family audience, but I'll let you get away with that.
his name is
Mr.
very
LGBT
fitting.
himself, right?
Senator Scott Wiener, who definitely needs to have his hard drive checked, did not like this bill. Senator Scott Wiener, one of his biggest donors is the Human Rights Campaign. The Human Rights Campaign is one of the biggest left-wing activist groups in the country, and they're responsible for a lot of the transgender madness that's coming through. As a matter of fact, their president was arrested 4 years ago for child pornography and
Well,
child
that's interesting.
trafficking.
I didn't know that, actually.
Hillary Clinton is a major donor, and she's got several awards from them. They fund Senator Scott Wiener. Senator Scott Wiener then went to the Senate and said, we have to strip out 16 and 17-year-olds from this bill. We don't like it, and I think the reasons for that should be obvious given who he's associated with. So what did they do? They
Because the
circled
gay
the
lobby
wagon.
likes to have sex with 16 and 17-year-olds.
Check his hard drive. Someone needs to check his hard drive.
Allegedly.
Right. So they circled the wagons, all that to say, because of one outside group that's not elected, that most people don't know about, but have huge, huge influence in our Assembly and Senate, a Democrat senator had her bill stripped, amended, and resubmitted. Now your 16 and 17-year-old does not have the same protections against sex trafficking because of an organization you've probably never heard of.
And you know what I thought was really funny, and Kurt, I want you to weigh in on this here. I thought when Wiener came up goes, hey, what happens when a 16, 17-year-old wants to pay for sex in high school? They should go to jail? And I'm thinking, first off, who expletive deleted in high school has the money to pay for sex? And yeah, they probably should. I mean, you got to wonder, Scott Wiener, what high school did you go to?
Mike, the drug dealers in high school.
I mean, it's just...
No, it's so sick. What he said was this bill could entrap two teenagers who want to pay each other $20 to fool around in the bathroom. That says a lot about what Scott Wiener was doing in high school and what Scott Wiener thinks is normal for high schoolers to do. And that's the man who is adjudicating a bill to make harsher penalties for sex traffickers. Like the rot is so deep. It's so deep. And that's why we do need an investigation. We do need the feds to come in. If I were governor, that's one thing I would do. If I won, first thing I would be doing is inviting the feds to come in and audit everything. If I were Secretary of State who runs all of our elections, the first thing I would do taking office is give Pam Bondi a call and invite them to audit our entire electoral system and to investigate it and invite the FBI. All of this stuff is connected. There's so much deep money. And I think it's going to happen. I think it will get rooted out, but we're like 2 years behind the rest of the country in this Trump wave, I think.
Well,
Hey,
you
you
know
know,
what interests me?
Elon Musk started his company here. Why don't we get a California Doge? Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That's
let's
what we
go-
need.
Let's go to one of my favorite subjects when I ask this here. And by the way, in the corner as you view tonight, before I forget to tell everybody, yes, your eyes are probably gravitating to the pitchfork behind Scott, but also remember there's a QR code because I do help run Rebuild California, run under the recall of Gavin Newsom. We'll run a clip here in a second, but before we do run that clip, I want to bring up something, Kira, why I'm asking this and why we need podcasters and Substack writers and the newsletter that I do about these things. And we all tend to gravitate to talking about the same things because I get it. It brings in viewers, it brings in people, whatever. But I want to give you an example of something that's really not only Doge, the FBI, even architects, of the deference of Scott and lawyers like Kurt should investigate, that is talked about a lot, for example, in Sacramento. Sacramento, and you and I have been to the Capitol many a time. I think I met you outside the old building. It looked to me like the old building was fine. It was still standing. I would go in there. Yeah, the furniture was a little bit old. But Sacramento decided, kind of in the dark of night, to build a new $1 billion headquarters. For everybody out there, Apple hardly builds a $1 billion headquarters, and they're using their money, not mine, okay? And what's interesting about this $1 billion headquarters, they originally appropriated $500 million or so. No one knows exactly what is going on behind those fences. And what also, when we talk open with the budget as an example, when you build a $1 billion building, when Gavin Newsom and the rest of his crew and Scott Wiener eventually term out or die of some horrible disease, not wishful thinking, let me be clear, it's going to cost a lot to run that building. And the state of California citizens are going to be stuck with that debt. Yet it's stuck behind secrecy. It's almost like the scandal that's barely reported. What is going on behind that fencing up there? And they made a big deal out of moving a tree. Remember that was in there. It's like, oh, we have this really old tree and we're going to pull it out. And the press came and looked at the tree. And then we forgot about the tree, the famous tree that we've all taken pictures in front of. But you're like, all right, now that we're through with the tree and they've covered up the tree, and be honest with you, somebody out there help me. I don't know what happened to the tree, but I'm more concerned about the future of California, but we don't report it. We don't know what it cost, who designed it, what's being put in the building, et cetera, right?
Right. No, we don't. Well, this is one thing our mutual friend Steve Hilton, who announced for California governor, part of his platform is,
right.
Well, I will put an end to that the second, we will just stop all that building and figure out what's going on. I mean, it's unsurprising, right? To people like us who have our nose in this stuff all the time, it's unsurprising that all this waste, and God only knows who knows what it's for. It could be a pool. It could have some kind of sculpture that they don't want to, some LGBTQ plus all the other letters sculpture that they don't want to alert anyone to. Who knows? The point is that it's pointless. We don't need it. Nobody asked for it. It's just an excuse to spend more of our money. Now, to your point about that being a story, Mike, and it's a story that not a lot of people are talking about, this is the frustration of being in California. We do not have a centralized state media, and the media is the same as Sacramento. It's largely controlled by the left. But again, if I just want to point to silver linings, I see that changing. I saw Bill Asalee on on KTLA recently
Yeah.
talking about his new job. 2 years ago, they never would have had Bill on there talking. They never would have even allowed, they would have ignored him. They would have just pretended that he didn't get that appointment. So that is already marking a shift. I have long said that we on the right need to be investing in some kind of centralized media source for California, that because there are a lot of really great independent people working out there. You and I are among them, working out there to get stories out. They break great stories, Susan Shelley and Amy Reichert, and they break great stories, but you're still not going to get a lot of eyes on them because you don't have the apparatus to disseminate that across California. The people in, my followers that live in Florida will see the stories I share, but how do I get to the high school mom to see the story, right? That can vote in California. So I don't know what the answer is. If I had a lot of
Well, I
money,
think the
I would
answer
make
is we
this
keep plugging
media
here. And
company.
by the way, it's like you peeked into my newsletter because I'm featuring an Amy Reichert thing in there tomorrow. That's kind of scary.
Okay.
But I also want to add, where Scott wants to run a clip here, we're going to run in a second, that believe it or not, Scott Wiener may have the answer because the legislatures could have just met in the bathrooms like high school. We didn't even need this damn big building. Scott, let's roll this clip.
Yeah, it's not a clip. You were talking about the new office building behind the Capitol building.
Yes.
That's what that is. And this is part of Capitol Park here. That can you see my mouse? So this is the new addition here behind the Capitol. And
yeah, we have no
I just
idea
thought-
what's in it. In fact, for years, they didn't know what was behind the fence.
Now you know it's starting to come above the fence. This is Scott Wiener's webpage, just so you guys know who our Senator Scott Wiener is. And I'm sorry to say that his name is Scott, but Wiener is definitely an appropriate name. So again, you've got corruption, and it starts with, frankly, it starts with the people that are in Sacramento, and they allow this kind of stuff to go on.
And it's going to take, that's why I say to win back California, I do feel positive about it, but it is going to be a miraculous effort. Don't get me wrong. A lot of things are going to have to happen at the same time, much like happened in the Trump campaign. And I think we should really be looking at replicating that as much as possible. All these things have to work together. It can't just be focusing on voter integrity, although that's got to be a huge part of it. There's got to be a lawfare aspect to it. There has to be a reporting, a media apparatus, a social media apparatus. How effective Trump was on the socials and on podcasting. So I believe that there has to be a deliberate, I don't know how else to put this, a deliberate branding effort for the 2026 election, where it's just hardcore, balls to the wall, everybody get in where you fit in, pick up a subject, pick a topic that you're passionate about, voter integrity, the border, minimum wage, whatever, find a group. Listen, you guys, I just talked to a friend of mine, a local friend of mine whose local GOP group, just like a women's club, raised $6,000 on their own by themselves to audit the Orange County registrar. They wanted an audit of the Orange County vote in 2024. And it was going to cost $6,000 for an independent accountant, and the party wouldn't pay for it. So they raised their own money. They financed that audit. And now that audit uncovered some very disturbing things, up to 300,000 invalid votes counted here in Orange County. And that's all because of that independent group that did not work themselves.
Just like we are.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just like we are all journalists now, right? And a lot of us are getting access by having podcasts. That's in effect what your guy did, putting money up, and he's doing his own little effort to try and do it. And how many more times are we getting that? I've got a picture of Steve Hilton up there. I know you guys attended his opening event. You think he has a shot at shining the light on some of this corruption, some of these things?
I do. I really do. I'm backing Steve 100%, 1,000%. And that is because I really believe that we're in a moment. I think we are in a moment. I think the rest of the nation has moved on from January, but Californians haven't. No one's taking Gavin seriously. Yeah, I know it's disturbing to see him out there with this stupid podcast, or he's making national news. We know he's making overtures for the White House, or to see Karen Bass just doing business as usual. But if you drill down on their posts and you see what they're always getting ratioed, Gavin's went from 1.2 million views of his first podcast with Charlie Kirk to less than 10,000 yesterday on his podcast with Frank Luntz. So nobody is buying it anymore. Do you know what I mean? And that's
Flash
going to be
pan.
temporary. Californians have a short memory. That's going to be temporary. So now is the time. That's why I do believe Steve has a chance. And you need somebody who's going to have high name recognition, who's going to have a lot of celebrity friends. This is a national election cycle. I told you about my school board race, how we weren't really in a national cycle then. It was sort of localized. It was a localized issues, and my support was local. Now all eyes are on California in a way that has never, I believe, happened before. So yes, with a confluence of events, the blessing of the Lord, and the hard work of people right down to the wire, yeah, I think Steve can win.
And I want to jump in and say, so one of the things Hilton has done, and I support Steve too, although because of being a PAC member, I've got to say, not an official endorsement, nobody throws stuff out at me, but I do support him. But I will also say this, that one of the things that Steve has done is he has already gotten the support of the Charlie Kirks and the Videk Razan, whose name I met him and I still can't remember. And other national figures, even like John Voight, one of my heroes. And that will bring a national attention to the 2026 cycle. And by the way, as we talk about the 2026 cycle, we talk about propositions and other things, I want to make it clear to everybody out there. Many of you out there aren't necessarily going to be obnoxious. Sorry, Karen, I'm going to include you because you're here, as the four of us are, all the time, jumping up on the air, yelling, kicking, and screaming, putting yourself out there. Many of you will say, I don't even know what to do, but I know something's wrong. Again, in the era of technology, what most people don't realize, you can actually do grassroots from your computer. Most of you know around 2 to 4 to 500 people from your Gmail, you can BCC them, just an article, the Substack that Kira does, or something that are news, or anything just to your friends. Just copy in the BCCs. You could do 500, many of you now 1,000 per day out of your Gmail, and kind of just get the word out. So grassroots today is also electronically driven. Now let's talk about the 2026 cycle, because shocking, I do go off track all the time. And what do you think, we know the governor's race, we know about Steve Hilton, we know about the sheriff guy running, along with a slew of candidates, more than the cast of the Rockettes. But let's talk about some of the other things that you think are going to be important. And Kurt, I do want you to chime in on some of these things that you think are going to be important in the 2026 cycle.
Do you mean as far as candidates or issues?
Candidates, offices, initiatives. In other words, voter ID is one, for example, that's coming up to get started. There's a school choice, which might be out there. But at the same time, we got some time now. Kurt, maybe you weigh in for a second. What are some things you'd like to see beside the standard?
Well, clearly the two you just mentioned are very important. If you think about voter turnout, there are a lot of 80-20 issues that we should put into an initiative. Preventing boys from playing in girls' sports. The CIF had a track meet last weekend. Jay Sarah, Crean Lutheran, and Orange Lutheran in Orange County sent a letter to the CIF softly demanding that boys not play in girls' sports. They let them in anyway. There were girls that showed up with T-shirts protesting boys in girls' sports, and were told they were not allowed to compete.
That's right.
Take their shirts off. So, yes, there's litigation and all that, but I think there should be an initiative banning boys from girls' sports, period, meaning biological boys. Banning boys in girls' locker rooms. These are 80-20, 90-10 issues. And then we should turn around and register voters at girls' sporting events. Mike has some electronic voter registration ideas. So that's one.
Well, hold on one
Um,
second, Kurt.
not putting a dress on
Before
John.
you go to number two, because I want to get back to you on that, Kurt actually has a really good point. Dan, producer, please mark this day on the calendar and circle it. Kurt has a good point. Kira, why do you think, for example, and we've tried to get a few initiatives before, but this is Kurt's right, it's an 80-20, okay? Most Democrats, and I don't want to say Democrats, most normal people, let's put Scott Wiener in a class of his own. Look, I've got offspring, they're older now. I really don't want members of the opposite sex in the locker room when my kids played sports. Why do you think the Republicans or the conservative, or generally, why are we so afraid of this issue that we don't speak up about it? Kira, I want to toss that to you and go back to Kurt's next issue. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're like, oh my God.
Oh, I don't think people are afraid, but let's hear what Kira has to say.
Well, this is what I'm saying. We're 2 years behind the country in the Trump revolution. So we still have an old Republican Party. So this old Republican Party are losers, and they're used to being losers, and that's how they think of themselves, as losers. And so they don't want to rock the boat because they're just hanging on by the skin of their teeth to the position of professional loser. And there is some influence in that. There is some influence in being the Washington Generals, and knowing your place and operating in the machine. But so I think there's a lot of Republicans who have been scared. I'm not going to name any names, but there were people that I also worked with the group that showed up at the track meet. Parent groups that I work with, we have approached certain politicians, certain assemblymen and assemblywomen to support our initiative, Saving Girls Sports. And before the Trump election, didn't want anything to do with it. Best they could promise us is we'll retweet something, but no one wanted to introduce a bill. No one wanted to have a press conference. As soon as Trump won, a couple of them came out with their bills. A couple of them got really bold, but they were the same people who said, I don't want to put my neck out there. So I think one of the reasons why is they're used to being losers, and the seats that we have, we're so scared to lose them because we're so much in the minority. No one wants to rock the boat. My opinion on that is that is what Californians and Americans in general are starving for. They don't want Democrat light. They want a sharp contrast. They want to hear strong, like you say, it's 80-20. Now, before I let Kurt jump back in, I do want to say this. This is one of the reasons why we need to be focusing on other offices. We do need, because this is an 80-20 issue. Okay, well, we need the people to vote on it. Well, how do we get the people to vote on it? You guys are really familiar with with the measure process and getting a measure on the ballot and how that works. And then you got to go through Democrats to get the language, right? And then you got to go through Democrats to even get it approved. Like you have to go through jump through all of these hoops to even get these things to the voters in the first place. So if we can manage that, and it can be done, but we've seen it takes a lot of effort. If we can manage that, then what we have to do is make a full court press to win the offices like Secretary of State, Attorney General. And I noticed you had Sonia on the show the other night, the superintendent of school.
No, she's on next week.
She's on next week. Great. Superintendent of schools, huge, huge, huge office that no one knows exists, but it affects all of your curriculum, all that crazy stuff that's coming to your schools. We have to win those offices, and then we have to do what Trump is doing. Doge it all, set up a system that really can't be reversed for another 10 or 20 years. Make sure that we have get rid of voters' choice acts that are going on across the state, and then shore up the system so that the next dope that comes in can't undo all that good work quickly.
It's interesting. Before we roll back to Kurt, too, I want to say I'm a Republican. We're all Republicans on the show. But let's also be clear here that even the same Democrats, yes, they are out there. Not everybody who is insane is necessarily a Democrat. like they're afraid to speak up. It's like this small group of people have gotten control. I mean, look what happened when we talked about the sex trafficking bill. That was a Democrat that proposed it this time, and like, shut up. And she's like, why? I mean, who the hell is it for kids? I'm like, shut up. Scott Wiener is speaking. Does Scott Wiener have an X-ray camera? I mean, it's
Scott
absolutely
Wiener
amazing.
has a HRC. That's Scott Wiener's weapon. He has HRC. Californians do not understand how much of our legislation is written by the Human Rights Commission.
And that is something what I talked about to begin with, the stories that we need to drill down in simple sound bites that the public understands. Colonel, I'm going to roll back to you in 1 second, but I want to be really clear on this, okay? We have issues. You look around, and I say this all the time. You've all heard me rant. Everybody likes water, electricity. Nobody likes getting shot, right? Nobody really thinks that the opposite sex, as we define them, which is the only way to do that, should be in the other locker room or anywhere within whatever. And boys should not compete in women's sports. Yet, we tend not to speak up on our side because, we're afraid we're going to lose one of the 3 offices we have. And the Democrats seem to be afraid, whatever. But we need to pound that issue, why that is. Kurt, bring up your next thing here.
Well, if you think about voter turnout, you want to get the pro-business people to turn out. You want to get the pro-family people to turn out. You want to get the law and order people to turn out. And so we'll look at the Proposition 13 vote or 36 vote last time. 70-30. So if we put initiatives on the ballot designed to appeal to the various types of voters, those 3 in particular, it's going to help us be successful.
That's why I said we need.
So what about a public safety?
Well,
initiative?
you need legal teams in place, right? Like you need all of that structure before we even to get a measure like that. Look at all the shenanigans we had to go through with 36. You know, they tried to do a, gas tax rejiggering of the language.
Okay.
And so our lawyers, like Trump came in on January 20th with a team of lawyers. He already knew what the challenges were going to be. He already knew they had already gamed it out for at least the last 4 years. This is what I'm saying the state party needs to do right now, need to be gaming out the legal challenges that can come if they want to get these measures on a ballot. It's great to talk about the measures we need on the ballot. How do you get a measure on the ballot? The Democrats own everything.
Well, let's talk about that,
Yeah.
Kara. At the Republican convention, we had a chance to elect different leaders, and the status quo won. Mike and Scott were there. And so it's got to come from us, not from them.
Boom. And that's how I want to jump in because I can't help myself. The recall of Gavin Newsom, okay, was started by 6 people with no political experience. Guys, stand back for 1 second. I'm going to go on a rant because Kurt's at hot rail with me here, okay? The trouble is, I think so much of the time, we wait for someone else to do something. Everyone out there watching this, we are sorry, Kara, fairly ordinary people, okay? We don't come from rich backgrounds, okay? We don't have 30 years in Congress, et cetera, et cetera. But for people that care, and a difference can be made if you just do something about these common sense issues. And Kara, I led you in with that question as to what not being reported, because again, everybody, if you don't know my age, I'm 68. Most people, they're 40s, 50s, and 60s. You grew up with, here's the mainstream media. This is where we get it from. And 10, 15 years ago, whatever the heck it was now, right, came along the social media and the technology where you do make a difference. You can get an initiative. You could do local initiatives, by the way. You could do city initiatives. You could change laws. I think that so much of the time, and Kara, you can agree or disagree with this, but I think you'll agree, we wait for somebody else to do something. Do you know what I mean? We're like, and I've got to admit, I've been that way.
Well, this is what I just told you about the group that raised their own money. They raised $6,000, and we're not going to wait for the county party to do this. They raised the
There you go.
$6,000 themselves. They audited it themselves, and these are the numbers that it now, in turn, not just the county party, but all of the national media is pulling on those numbers to report what's going on in Orange County. It's just a group of regular middle class people who did it themselves.
So let's flip back here a little bit to your vodcast here. We'll let you go in about 3 or 4 minutes here. And what is literally some of the funniest thing where they haven't listened to themselves that you've talked about?
Well, let me just explain a little bit about my podcast. It's a critical thinking podcast. So this is a podcast where I take hot topics, I take hot button ideas, and I discuss the talking points on those topics. I draw those talking points all the way out to their logical conclusion. So it's really an exercise in persuasion and critical thinking. It's me going through with the audience and just digging into an issue and then seeing if I can change my own mind on it. And so I'll do issues of the day. I recently, my most recent podcast, I covered that unfortunate stabbing in Texas, involving that young man, Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah.
So I covered that, and this issue of Black fatigue that's coming up in social media. I covered that. But I've also done more benign, like one of my biggest podcasts I did, you guys, I still get fan mail about it, is one I did on small talk. It's called The Death of Small Talk. And one day my young adult son was over with his friends. They're playing Dungeons and Dragons. I got a D&D guy. And they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I went in to meet them, and they were nice. They were friendly young people, but I was trying to chat with them, but they had no small talk. They had no game. They weren't chatting. They weren't really, they just were one-word answers. They weren't very open and friendly, although, good guess, no issues with them. But it made me think, gosh, we're losing the art of small talk. And my son said, well, it's just that those kids they're smart kids, they're intellectual kids. They feel like small talk's kind of beneath them. They want to have deeper conversations. So I said, okay, hang on. We need to break this down. What is small talk? What purpose does it serve? Why is it dying? And why is it, the height of hubris to assume you're too smart for small talk? I talked for an hour and a half by myself on it.
Fantastic point, because I talk about that all the time. Politics. It's like, instead of taking your receipt from the target person, just say, hey, and I do this. I'll be checking out at a whatever, and there's the person with purple hair and flaming whatever, right? And I'll go, hey, what do you think of the taxes on here? They go, I think it sucks, man, and I pay too much for gas going over. Small talk. But most people don't do that. And I also want to say that I love the Substack article. I think you put it out today. Again, seems a very benign point, but I don't remember the exact thing. But beware of the wicked smile,
yes.
The people that show their teeth. Because I'm like, yeah, we used to call that creepy. And oh my God, I put that up, as you noticed on my X feed. That's kind of like Gavin Newsom. It's like when I was a little kid, if my parents had seen somebody going, they would have gone, hey, don't go near that guy, because his clown makeup must have fallen off.
Well, let me say
and
this,
he's
Mike.
a bit weird.
This is what we're seeing happening again, just to bring this full circle. This is why I really think that Steve Hilton's got a great chance as governor, and we have a great chance, period, to change things, to affect change. We've talked a lot after November, right, about the vibe shift. You heard that term a lot. The vibe shift, the vibe has shifted. I think we can all agree it certainly has shifted, and it seemed to shift overnight. What happened was the kids got sick of fake. The kids are sick of fake. Kamala is fake, fake, fake. Newsom, fake, fake, fake. All the Democrats fake. During COVID, when Nancy Pelosi's in her luxury San Francisco apartment showing us her Sub-Zero that she has just for luxury ice cream, people were paying attention to that. We thought that kind of got lost in no. All of that was sitting in the American psyche. And the millennials came along and they branded everything, right? Everything's a brand with the millennials. Gen Z came after them, and Gen Z said, we're sick of the brand, we're sick of the slick marketing. That's why you see when these kids are on their phone, these influencers, they're not doing slick videos, are they? They're just right there in their phone. They're up close like this. Oh, let me tell you a story. Let me get ready with me while I tell you a story. What is that? That's authenticity. It's still fake, but it's authenticity. This is where everything is moving.
Is it just
Everyone
called fake authenticity?
fake authenticity, yes, because it's
Yeah, I
not
was just
real.
gonna
It's
say that
social
stuff
media
so
still. It's
much.
still manufactured. But the idea is the kids are looking at Gavin Newsom. The kids are looking at Kamala. The kids are looking at Barack Obama. He didn't sell himself this year. This year was the downfall of Barack Obama. Why? Because he's fake. And the kids don't, they can see it. They see it when they smile. All those teeth, it creates a visceral reaction. We have spent the last 30 years in education trying to train that out of our kids, right? Trying to tell them, don't believe your lying eyes. That's a girl, not a boy, right? That's a friendly smile, not a creepy smile. We've been training that out of our kids for 30 years. So it's time to train that back in. So the article I wrote today on my Substack, it's part of a series. This message called Messages for My Children. It's just a series of me talking to my future children. In case I'm not here or when, none of us make it out of here alive, they'll be able to look back and see little points of advice I gave them. So today I talked about the toothy grin. Yeah, does it feel weird when you see somebody doing that? Yeah, that's because they're fake. Pay attention to that. And that's what they're seeing with this current crop of Democrat politicians, even all of this cursing they're doing and getting all, whatever base about stuff, fake. It's reading as fake. People can see. So beware, yes, of the
Is
toothy
is
grin.
that AOC with the toothy grin?
Yep,
AOC.
because we've got a lot of toothy grin politicians in California. So authenticity, however manufactured that it is, authenticity is what's going to sell. Authenticity is what's going to win 2026 for California. I truly believe that.
Good point. And by the way, before I let Kira release her from hostage, if you will, on this show, it's interesting when you talk about that because Karen Bass is like, LA just burned down.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
did you have her mouth sewn into a smile?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, by the way, we're $1 billion in debt.
Yeah. Are you an
Homeless
alien?
counts up.
What is going
It's
on?
like, are you like that insensitive to people? It's like, is her mouth? You start to wonder after a while, is there something like, I mean, what is really wrong with these people that they literally beware? In her case, it's a non-toothy grin, but it's creepy. I mean, it's almost like I'm delivering bad news.
There's
If the budget was ever balanced,
there.
right?
Yeah.
Is that why when you
So-
catch Karen Bass
Mike,
off
I'm
record,
going to take
off
you
time,
back to
she doesn't smile?
1982.
Go ahead.
Take you back to
Yes, Kurt.
1982. Don Henley, the bubble-headed bleach blonde that comes on at 5 that tells you about the plane crash with a gleam in her eye. That's Christine Lund from Channel 7 in Los Angeles.
Oh gosh. Wow. Wow.
Okay.
We're
So,
not all
Carol,
as
before
old
we
as
let
Kurt,
you go, that's a good point, though, Kurt. And by the way, Kira, I want to dwell on your point. We relabel stuff, right? We used to call them logos. We used to call them, now we call them branding. I mean, it's the same, every generation rediscovers stuff on its own, right? But the reality is we kind of recycle it and repackage it a bit. But to what you said in your Fox segment, or what someone said in your Fox segment, I don't think it was you, it's like the public is like, we could kind of see for our eyes that Biden was dying before our eyes, but you're telling us everything is fine, and you can't really get away with that. Kara, lay on us again before we release you from hostage. You're welcome to stay on. We go about another 10 minutes. But tell us again where people could find you, what your next appearance is, and do you have any plans to do an upcoming segment in a movie?
All right, I'll answer that last question first. No movie roles yet, but I am an empty nester coming up in the fall, so maybe I'll strike out on a new career. Of course, you can find my podcast at anywhere that you find your audio podcast. It's called Just Listen to Yourself. That should be easy enough to remember. It's on YouTube as well. And you can go sign up for my Substack at justkiradavis.substack.com. Follow me. X is the best place. If you want to know more, because everything I post to X as well. So that's at Real Kira Davis. Go follow me on there. And then if you're interested, I think this is actually a good book for this time. It's a bit dated. Yeah.
Hold on, because as we're scrolling everything across the bottom of the screen, and even though you're my guest, I want to give you a homework assignment. Would you send me a picture of the book along with the link where people can purchase it? Because I get that comment, a host shows up a thing and we scroll stuff on the bottom of the screen, because I'll post that on my X account too and throughout our social media. So I
Absolutely.
like it, drawing lines. Go ahead and tell us a little bit more
Well, I
about
think
it.
why you like this book and why Dan Bongino called it a no holds barred battle plan for conservatives is because when I wrote the book, I was just beginning my doomed run for school board. But one of the things that I had said was, you know what? It's time for everyone to get in the game. I don't think that any of us have the luxury of sort of sitting back and letting other people do it, because we're at critical mass in the nation right now. And so I actually have solid, workable, practical ideas for what you can do right where you are right now to affect change politically in California and where you are. Just giving you ideas for ways to help that don't involve running for office. Everyone thinks if you want to help in politics, you got to run for office. But no, of course not. There's so many other things that you can do. So I break down what at the time were the hottest issues, trending issues. I break down what's right about them, what's wrong about them, and then I tell you where you can get in and fit in. And that's really my message going forward into 2026 for anyone working in politics, or worried about politics in this state until next year when we get to vote again. Get in where you fit in. Find a place that you feel passionate about, that you have a talent to offer, even if it is just putting stamps on fundraiser envelopes. Find something. We do not have the luxury of people taking the summer off. If you're tired, I don't care.
Boy,
Yeah.
what a great way to end this segment. It is so critically important. Get Kara's book, follow this, do everything you can. 2026 starts now, okay? And Kara, you are a rock star. It is such a pleasure. It was so exciting to see you on the stage at
That
Huntington
was so
Beach,
fun.
where I had a front row seat up there going,
That was so
in front of 2,000 people. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. We do appreciate you, and we'll probably have you back on again because, I'm not that popular, Kara. I got to go with who knows me. So,
I would love to come back. Thank you for inviting me.
and by the way, we're happy to return the favor and come on yours podcast too
Fair enough.
sometime and rock and roll, because for everyone out there, you do make a difference. Kara Davis, thank you again. You are a rock star, and we look forward to following you next at Real Kara Davis, by the way, because apparently there's a fake one out there. Getting the book and the podcast, etc., up on my feed at Netter Mike, which I can remember. And you can, again, if you're watching this, you can back it up, and we're scrolling around the screen. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and your soon-to-be empty nester. Because I know now you're probably making plans to do things with all those rooms like we all do. God bless you. I know, I hear you. It's like the kids come home and I'm like, what happened?
That's my office. That's my tanning room.
Now my new studio.
Right.
You're on the couch.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. God bless you out there. Mike, I will talk to you later. We'll definitely be talking again. All
You
right.
got it. Thank you
Bye-bye.
very
All right,
much.
Kara, take
All
care.
right. Talk to you later.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
So Kurt, I want to roll to you a little bit in the last 10 minutes and give us some of the stories of the day that you've been paying attention to.
All right. One is our politicians have done a very poor job of hardening our electrical grid. And
Hey, you're
there's a
hard
number
to
of
hear.
articles. It's more than we could.
Kurt, you need to
I
turn
said
your
a
sound
number
up
of
a
our
little bit.
politicians. I'm sorry.
We're having trouble hearing you. Even annoying as you are, we want to hear what you
A
have.
Move
number
your
of
mic.
politicians. It is. A number of politicians have ignored the problem of our electrical grid, which is vulnerable. Why should you care? Because if the electrical grid is attacked, either through viruses, through implanted devices to destroy it, the majority of the people die in a very short period of time with no electricity. And our politicians, including in California, and we can post the notes so people can read it on your on your Twitter feeds. But this is a serious problem, and we don't have serious politicians that'll address actual serious problems. And this is something in California. There's almost 40 million people. So there are serious problems we can solve if we had serious people trying to solve them.
Yeah, but all you're
And Kurt, I
doing is
want
you're
to jump
highlighting
in
the
there.
fact that the state is run by a bunch of blue politicians and they're inept. I mean, name one thing in this
There is
country well.
I want everyone out there, Dan, if you could roll this, called Grid Down, Power Up, which is a movie with Dennis Quaid in, and I helped promote and did the opening for, quick plug for me, about a year ago, that talks about this very thing. Okay, where the grid is under duress for a number of reasons. Kurt, you have an excellent point, because this issue is brought up, put away. This film documentary by my buddy David Tice came out about 2 years ago, and Grid Down, Power Up. Google that, look at it. I think it's free now online, but it talks about the great issue, Kurt, to bring up. Back to you. Bring us another one here.
All right, we talked about the problem
Boy,
of the CIF track meet and with boys playing a girls' sports. So we'll skip down to the education problems. There's so many in our state. Several Chinese students from Stanford apparently have been acting as spies for the Chinese Communist Party.
I'm shocked. Really?
So the solution is there's 280,000 Chinese students in America. And I've got a question. All these universities are subsidized by American taxpayer money. Why do we have any? Why are these spots not going to American citizens?
Because they pay a
Because of
higher tuition.
our public school, Kurt. We can't get kids bright enough sometimes, which is kind of a lead-in that before we leave tonight's show to talk about what we're doing next week. But part of the problem is that all the things we talk about in public education, they're kind of dumbing down the kids. So many of them can't even qualify to get into a 2 or 4-year university. But that's a good point.
All right, you may have heard about the angry parent at the Glendale school board meeting, and the liberal board members were trying to interrupt the parent, and he stood his ground. It was very impressive. I think a lot of people like our guest a few moments ago are just fed up. And I think the last election
it's
showed how
interesting.
fed up so many people are.
Kurt, I watched that presentation, and he was criticizing a school board employee, and he was using her name. And they kept interrupting him, saying, let's not make it personal. And he's kind of like, what? I'm talking about one of your employees and the activities that they're doing on official business, and I don't like it. And so, in other words, it's a favorite trick of the liberals to sit there and accuse you of being unprofessional and impolite and being personal, when really he was talking about school business and what she was doing and how bad it was, and getting paid $250,000 a year to do it. Anyway, go ahead, Kurt.
And I gotta jump in on this again, because Kurt always has great stories here. This is what we were talking about earlier with Kira about things we don't. You go to work for a public institution. Kurt, you went to college, you know what the word public means. You use other people's money, and there's things called the Brown Act, which means it's a public institution, and your pay and your activity is subject to, I'm going to use that dirty word, Democrats again, public scrutiny, and we don't talk about enough. Kurt, give us 1 or 2 more stories there before we roll off into the sunset, which is behind you.
All right, you may have heard at the Palo Alto High School, Northern California in the Silicon Valley, just voted to remove honors biology for all students after removing honors English. And they call it delaning. Because the real issue here, guys, let's just be blunt. White and Asian students are predominantly taking AP and honors courses, and liberals want to pretend that there are no differences in educational achievement among the races, because we're going to make everyone equal on the basis of race, whether they are or not.
Yeah, dumb them down.
And so the solution is to dumb everybody down to the lowest common denominator. But it's getting so bad that even the radical left-wing Ro Khanna, the congressman from up there, is criticizing.
Wait a second. Why do they call it delaning? I don't get it.
Because dumbing
Meaning
down,
we don't
because
want
dumbing down is
good
too easy
students
for
to
the
be in a
public to do.
lane to overachieve.
They make up names for stuff because they want to. It's really dumbing down, making everybody equal. So they come up with a new term. Sorry, it's
So
kind of like
it's getting rid of the fast lane, so everybody's in the stupid lane. I mean, the slow lane.
yes. In other words, why do
The stupid lane.
why do
Yeah,
they call
it's
winter a
stupid
cold
lane.
snap? It's winter. Okay, Kurt, you got one more before we roll off here?
Let's see. What's the most outrageous
How
thing?
about the fires
Um,
and the fire response?
Well, we talk about that every week. It's totally incompetent. But down here closer to home, Scott let us know about Irvine having a gay pride parade or event next week on the 22nd. But guys, the liberals in Irvine have a dilemma because at the same time they're having that gay pride event, they're having a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting. So if you're a good brainwashed liberal, you're on the horns of a dilemma. Do you go to the DEI meeting or do you go to the gay pride celebration?
It's very difficult, and I would like to say that none of the four of us, including our producer and the team behind me that shares, like Stephanie, and by the way, thanks to everybody for the comments tonight. I didn't have a chance to respond to them all. But for everyone out there, it's like none of us will be participating in Equity Day, LGBTQ. However, I would like to extend an open invite to Irvine that if you ever have a heterosexual day, we will be happy to show up, okay? Because that's
we'll
probably
podcast live.
or we'll podcast live from there. Kurt, thank you very much. You always bring up one. Scott, hit us.
One
Oh,
more
you got
thing,
one
Mike.
more
You
in the
gotta do
hopper. Hit
one
me.
more thing. Transgender, we had a victory this week. A federal judge in California ruled that Encinitas schools in San Diego County must give parents the right to opt out of radical gender indoctrination activities.
Yes,
So
I'm
it's good
putting
we had
that
a
in
win.
Netter News tomorrow morning when it launches. Excellent point. We are winning slowly but surely, and we need to win more rapidly. Kurt, thank you very much. Scott, give me a blast here before I bring us out.
Hey, we didn't talk about the fires. Well, first of all, on Irvine's Gay Pride thing, rather than just doing Gay Pride Month, the whole month of June. I don't know why they get a whole month and everybody else only gets a day, but they get a whole month. That wasn't enough for Irvine, so they're starting it on Harvey Milk Day, which is what May 22nd is. So they'll run their Gay Pride flag and post it up there next to the city flag for a little bit over the month of June, just because June, I guess, is not enough. And Harvey Mudd is, the former.
So, Scott, can you remind us of who the late Harvey Milk was?
Harvey Milk was the guy who was a supervisor up in San Francisco County that was gunned down. But, he was the first openly gay elected official, supposedly. And some people thought he was a pedophile. I don't know if he was ever convicted of that, so I'll say alleged. And he's not a good guy, and yet he's revered by everybody because he was the first openly gay guy elected.
He wasn't actually gunned down, though. That's an interesting story. He wasn't gunned down because he was gay. He was other reasons, and we'll go on. So, again, we tend to celebrate a homicide, which only because this person was whatever. There's lots of signs. We can roll into that later. If you were to pick one thing this week as a political advocacy issue that you were to yell and scream about, what would it be before I tell everybody what next week's show is going to be about? If I haven't given you a good hint what to rant and rave about, I don't know what to do.
Well, I agree. I mean, Kurt brought up the fact that the school district, a judge directed the school district that they have to give notice to parents because they're talking about gay issues, LGBTQ issues. And our school, and starting with the state superintendent of schools, basically has a rule started by our legislature and probably Senator Scott Wiener that if you're talking about LGBTQ issues, that's considered biology teaching, and parents are not allowed to opt out. They're not allowed to require, school districts are not allowed to require parental permission. And in effect, this judge has kind of overruled the state law on that because that what they were talking about is LGBTQ. Now, if they talk about gay sex, now you're talking about sex ed, and parents have a right of refusal. But if it's just LGBTQ, then that's not eligible to opt out for the parents. So that's why we're bringing our guest on next week.
Well, it's a lot of reasons. Next week, everybody, and for everyone out there, it's always about the kids. Next week, we have Sonia Shaw on, who is the head of the Chino Valley School District, the president of their board, who is running for state superintendent. And I want to say that next week is about Sonia Shaw. Do tune in. But it's always should be about the kids, because this is where all the things we talk about, from what Kira was talking about, from small conversation, each generation that comes up behind us should be better and smarter than the next generation. But here's the reality. The left or the Democrats really don't want that, because the young people will catch on to what they're doing. Well, I got news for you, Democrats and left. We're the old people, we're still in charge, and we've caught on. And we are going to help educate and save the next generation. Go ahead, Kurt.
Well, Mike, I want to remind you, when you talked about it's for the kids, not everyone believes that in California. The head of the California Teachers Association back in the 90s said he'll start caring about kids when kids start.
That is what the head of that, but the average person doesn't. There are people that we've let, good lead for my closing rant. There are people that we have let into power that have convinced us that it's not right to care about the kids, but there are very few, if any, parents out there, and I know there's some, that don't give a damn about their offspring and the future generations. And everyone out there, next week's show, when we have Sonia Shaw, and all week long until we come back, I want you to take a real good look, even if you are an empty nester or a grandparent or have no kids at all, at what the Democrats and the left are doing to our school systems. It's got started slowly, it's accelerating, and we are, to quote Gavin Newsom, going to do full stop as we hit it next week on California Free Radio. Thank you for listening tonight. Thank you to Kira Davis. God bless and good night. Dan, take us out.
Hey, good night, guys. Remember, we'll be